One of the biggest choices you have to make as you're deciding how to architect the content of your site and your personalized segments of content is how you want to call up the individual, what we call swaps, the individual pieces of content within a section of your website, which we call segments. Um, what are the ways that the system decides which swap to serve for each segment? There's two main mechanisms: visitor types and rules. Visitor types is here, rules is here. So, in the guided setup, in the order that we're recommending you set everything up, we're recommending that if you plan to use visitor types, set those up before you build your content. And the reason is when you go in to build your content, you can tag each swap with which visitor type you want to associate it with. That way, when the system has triggered a visitor type, when it recognizes that, yes, this is the visitor type of the person that's currently browsing the website, it will serve all the versions of swaps that are tagged with that visitor type. Um, Rules you actually set up later. You set rules up after the fact. And there are certainly cases where you can mix visitor types and rules. In those cases, if you have a rule that conflicts with a visitor type, the rule takes precedence. And so the use case for something like that is like in our pet store example, let's say that our, and we'll go through this in the content build out, but let's say that our headline is primarily geared towards what type of pet the person owns. So if we recognize that this is a cat lover, we'll say something about cats and change the photo. If we recognize that it's a dog lover, same thing for dogs. But if we create a route, and that would be set based on visitor types, we can recognize based on what pages they've visited whether they're more likely a dog person or a cat person. However, let's say that we also have set up a promotion to run within particular days. That's more of a rules thing. So you would create a rule that highlights the promotion within that banner area and then trigger that to go for, a certain period of time. Because rules supersede visitor types, that promotion would show to everyone when that rule was true. So let's set up visitor types. Let's assume that you're going to have visitor types set up before you create your content. Um, Visitor types are intended to, just like in the pet store example, be different cohorts of users that use your site with different intentions. So that allows you to create a more personalized experience for those intentions. One example of this is a customer of ours called CBD Consulting. So in their case, what they do is they have the visitor self-identify their visitor type. So I'm a teacher, I'm a school administrator, or I'm a vendor contractor with a school district. Once someone selects who they are, the site morphs to all of their personalized content. So these sections have changed. The menu items that are available have like cleaned up and filtered down and changed. And then if you change to a different visitor type, the content changes again. So this is the use case for visitor types. You set up visitor types when you want to have your website give different types of content or a more filtered experience to certain cohorts of users when you've identified who they are that are visiting the site. You don't have to use this self-identifying approach, but this is certainly one way to do it and a pretty effective one. Other ways to set visitor types on the page are based on what pages they visited. You'll see once we set up a visitor type how you can trigger them. So let's do that now. We're going to set up cat lovers and dog lovers. there are two places where you can set up visitor types, either within the Swaptify app directly or within WordPress in the Swaptify plugin section under visitor types. So here in the plugin, we can see that we don't have any visitor types set here. I'm going to set one up here and then one up on the other side just so you can see how they sync. So let's do cat lovers. So here is our cat lover visitor type. We'll go over all of this stuff in just a moment. So if I go over here and hit refresh, we should see cat lovers. Here's cat lovers. Alternatively, you can create a visitor type from here. So create new, dog lovers. So this gives you the same information. This is all just instruction information as what you see over here in the plugin. And we'll just work through this in a moment. But first, let's refresh and see if dog lovers came into the plugin. And here we are. So for the sake of our pet store example, to keep things, on the simpler side, let's go with just these two visitor types for now. And now let's take a look at what all these instructions are telling you. Okay. What do we want to look at it here or on the Swaptify site? Let's look at it over here just because there's a little more style. Okay, so the question after you set a visitor type, the first thing is, how do you tell Swaptify that this visitor type is now active? So there are a number of triggers that you can use to code this to Swaptify. The first one is to add via a click element. So you would do that with a class that gets generated here. So this is a long class name that's unique to you and your Swaptify instance. So by adding this class name to something like a button or an anchor tag, that will tell Swaptify that it should now associate that visitor type with the experience of the rest of your website where you have selected that visitor type as the swap in each segment. We can also do a click element through data keys, which is just a different attribute method in the HTML markup. So if you don't want your classes to be real sort of like long and ugly, you can use data keys instead. So this would be the value of this particular data key, which is here. These will work exactly the same. What if you want to set up a visitor type, trigger a visitor type after someone completes a form? You could add this class to your form. And once that form is submitted, it will trigger the visitor type. Now, keep in mind, because of different form processing and different form success mechanisms, and the fact that sometimes forms, when they succeed, redirect to a new page or post to a new page, we're not looking for validation with this one. Similarly to maybe like in Google Analytics, if you're using the stock form submit event, it doesn't know or care whether that form was submitted successfully or whether it failed. This is merely reflecting a form submission attempt. So if someone attempts to submit a form, regardless of what happens next, this visitor type gets set. Next, we might want to load a visitor type on a page view. And that's in that instance, we're just going to send a script. We're going to send a little JavaScript back to Swaptify on page load. So you can load this script right onto your page in WordPress. You can load it via Tag Manager and use a page-specific trigger in Tag Manager to power this script that you set up in a tag. And then the final one is exactly the same script. It's just without the script tags, because we're saying that you run this function straight from already existing JavaScript. So one of the ways where this can get pretty cool is all the customizations you can do when you code your own triggers. So one of the ones I've been thinking about a lot lately is, let's use our pet store as an example. We could develop a cookie system that keeps track of different pages that are associated with different categories, and we would pick that up from the HTML. So you would tag every page on the website that is related to cats or dogs using WordPress's inherent tag system. You could, on the WordPress side, then tell it to output those tags onto the body class of the page, pick up those body classes from a script that you're running. Now, keep in mind, this is all outside of Swaptify, right? This script and this processing is just something that's happening on your end, and then you'll send the results of this processing to Swaptify. But we can keep track of how many pages that someone has visited related to either cats or dogs by storing this data in a cookie every time they visit a page that's tagged that way. We can then create a script that changes the visitor type that the website is set to in terms of Swaptify based on the balance of those visits. So let's say someone is, let's say they own both a cat and a dog, and so they're looking at both dog and cat content. Or they're a dog person, but they just happen to accidentally click on a cat page. If that was the case, you might not want their Swaptify session to just automatically switch to cats because they happen to click on one cat page, right? So the solution here that you could code is to say, we're not switching the Swaptify visitor type until the balance of visited pages tips towards the other category or tag. So it's keeping a tally. This person's been to one dog page and then one cat page and then two dog pages and two dog pages. So now it's set, the balance is towards dogs. So the script could have called this function here and said, make that dogs. Because I don't know about you, but I have pets. And when I shop for pets, I'm typically shopping for one pet or the other and not everyone all at once, because the food will run out at different times. So by switching the visitor type to reflect the balance of what's currently popular in a browsing experience, it allows that balance to change later, but it allows the personalized experience to reflect the content that they're more interacting with. And you could go as deep and wide as you want with this, but that's just one particular example. So I think that does it for covering how we go about visitor types. We're going to see visitor types pop up again when we build content, and we'll take a look at building content just in the next video.